Thank you, Bala, and I really had fun working on this presentation, which we co-created with Rahul Kovar and Prashant and Bala, of course. And so basically, we started by saying, what does it look like? What do we need to do to get through the next 10 years and do something meaningful? And we said, if it's business as usual, we will grow, India will grow at 6%. Now, that's not a bad deal. There are many countries where there's no growth. So when they hear that India is going to grow at 6%, they get quite excited. But we said, if you really want to reach everyone, if you really want to raise a standard of living for more people, if you want to grow richer before we grow older and so on, we need to do something to take it to the next level. How do we take it to the next level of growth? And we said, what do we need to do to go to 8% CAGR? And that's everybody's mind. How do we really change the growth pattern? And instead of getting to 6 trillion in GDP by 2035, can we get to 8 trillion in GDP? And what is it that we can do to unlock that? What is it we can do to change the trajectory of growth? And this is not about some broad policy recommendations and stuff like that. This is actually about specific things we can do to make a difference to the trajectory of the next 10 years. Now, Bala mentioned how over the last 15 years we have changed the whole thing of identity. Aadhaar went from 0 to 1.2 billion people, 100% coverage across adults. eKYC costs dropped dramatically from $23 to 50 cents. And this drop in eKYC enabled many things. It allowed bank account opening. Today we have 700 million Aadhaar-linked bank accounts. The mobile revolution, Jio used that to get 100 million customers in 6 months in 2016-17. The whole activity in the in the whole stock market, the companies like Zerodha, Grow, Dhan, Upstocks, and and Angel One are all essentially able to scale up because they could use eKYC to get people into capital markets. Today we have 180 million demat accounts. So that became the entry point. And of course, another great success was DigiLocker, which was launched by my friend Ram Sevak Sharma in 2015 when he was IT secretary. And today it has a few hundred million users and billions of documents. So everybody keeps their Aadhaar details or their driver's license, their PAN card in their phone. So this happened with identity. The same thing happened with digital transactions. In 2016, UPI was zero. UPI was launched on April 11, 2016. Today it does 16 to 17 billion transactions, 350 to 400 million users, 50 million merchants, and it's become a way of life. The same thing with Bharat Bill Payment System. They today does about 240 million bills per month. It acts as an aggregator. And then, of course, we have account aggregator, which is the unique model where individuals and businesses can use their own data to get ahead in life. So they can use their own data of their business to get ahead in life, get access to credit and so on. And this has done cumulatively so far about $10 billion of loans. It does other things too. It does personal finance management and all that, but the big use case is loans. So this is the transactional side of what happened. And then another huge thing was India has become a single market. This is quite a big development because we were already a single market in services because we have a single banking regulator. So all banks, a bank account can be operated anywhere. Your ID can be operated anywhere. Your mobile number is completely interoperable. You can use it anywhere. But the big deal that happened was we had a fragmented market in goods, which got solved with GST. And GST essentially made a single market where you pay one tax, and part of that money goes to the central government and part of it goes to the state government. This was a great unifier because in the old model, people had to create warehouses in every city or every state, but now you can have a national warehouse. You can really do planning of logistics based on business reasons and not just because of the tax reasons. And this has also improved tax formalization with tax, people in the tax going from 4 million to 14 million paying GST and so on. Then of course there was FASTag, which united the whole country. Today, it's gone to about 4 billion payments value in a year, 2.5 billion transactions. So across the country, we have a single system of electronic toll payments, and even this has been designed as a platform. So there are startups now which use this for parking. I think Park One or something. There are startups which will use it for congestion charges. So it's a platform for debiting the movement of a vehicle. And then many people who said, what is all this stuff, suddenly woke up to DigiYatra and saw that they could enter airports and go in one shot to the plane. The first time they realized that something has happened. And that has done 14 million digital Yatra passengers have traveled through Indian airports since 22. So this has all created a single market for services, products, which is quite a remarkable thing, that we have this extraordinary single liquid market. And also India is a single market for labor, which we sometimes tend to forget. And that's very important to understand that in China, for example, you had systems of permits for people from Western China to come to, Pudong and all that. Whereas in India, it's actually a free market for movement of people. And as we come back later, we'll see how that has made a big difference. Now, so we have come a long way in all these things. But when you look at the future, there is no real strategic plan on how do we go from 6% growth to 8% growth. So we are in totally uncharted territory. And there are several headwinds: income disparity, lack of formalization, low productivity, market access, and so on. So let me explain these headwinds. It's quite shocking to know that only 13 districts out of 788 districts contribute to half of India's GDP. Only 13 districts. The per capita GDP of Bihar is 1/6 that of Telangana. In the same country, you have such wide spatial disparity, which is really quite an issue that we have to deal with. Therefore, we are also seeing, along with that, we are seeing different rates of fertility. If you look at Bihar, the total TFR, or total fertility rate, is 3. Now, the replacement rate of fertility in any society is 2.1. And if you look at South, the TFR is 1.7 in Karnataka. So what that means is Eastern and Northern India has a fertility rate by and large above the replacement rate, and Southern India and Western India has a TFR below the replacement rate. So that is also leading to huge migration, and more than 200 million people. They're not necessarily coming permanently, they may be going back and forth. So this is one of the biggest migration waves happening. It's similar to what happened in China. When China did industrialization, there's a huge wave of traffic from Western China to Beijing, Pudong, Guangzhou, and all that. So something similar is happening here, and we'll talk about that. So this is a very important thing that is happening. And then look at the income disparity. The top 10% earn 60% of India's national income. And then another 40% own, about 1.65 lakhs per annum, but the bottom 15% own only 71,000 rupees per annum. So there's huge income disparity. So these are all headwinds that we're seeing as we go forward. And very interestingly, the largest asset class of Indians is land, and you cannot monetize land. In other words, it's very, very difficult for a landowner to actually get access, use his land as collateral to get a credit. And 50% of India's wealth is actually in land. And this is even more so in rural India, where everybody has a small piece of land, maybe it's got fragmented, but there's no way to monetize it. So we have a challenge here where the real estate, which is the largest asset class, is not monetizable. And therefore, we are also a country of low productivity. US $82 per hour, China is $28 per hour, India $7 per hour. So we have low productivity across all our activities. And most importantly, which sometimes we don't recognize, we have among the smallest formal economies in the world. So only 15% of Indians are in the formal economy, whereas in Brazil it's 60%. So basically, very few people in the formal economy. So these are some of the things that we have to deal with. And informality is not only about individuals, it's about businesses. We are supposed to have 63 million small and micro businesses. Only 8 million file GST. If you say GST tax is a symbol of formalization, only 8 million file GST. Only 1 million pay ESI and PF. ESI is for insurance, PF is for Provident Fund, which is like a defined benefits system. And only about 29,000 have a paid-up capital of more than 10 crore. So it's really a very small set of people who are there. So that there's no lack of formalization in the business sector. And huge shortage of capital for small businesses. So this is an RBI report which shows that the gap is $530 billion between the demand and supply. In other words, small businesses are not able to grow because of lack of access to capital. So the combination of lack of access to capital and lack of access to markets essentially leads to stunted growth. So clearly we have to fix this to get the real economy going in a big way. So today I will talk about 4 unlocks. 4 unlocks which can change the trajectory of growth from 6% to 8% and GDP to go from 6 trillion to 8 trillion by 2035. And those 4 unlocks are technology, capital, entrepreneurship, and formalization. And I will make specific recommendations on what is to be done in each case. Now let's come to technology. We know that we have had great success in the last several years. Since the launch of Geo in 2016, launch of UPI in 2016, today we have over 500 million people with a smartphone. WhatsApp has around 530 million users in India. UPI, PhonePe has about 350 million users in India. So we have gone quite a way. But how do we take this to everyone? How do we get 1 billion people to do that? Obviously, one part of that will be networks getting cheaper or smartphones getting cheaper. Now we are seeing sub 10,000 rupee smartphones. And over time, the mobile operators will not be able to support multiple generations of technology. So they will decommission 2G, then they will decommission 3G. So the next 5 years, you really have only 4G and 5G networks. And therefore, there'll be a much larger number of smartphones, maybe 800, 900 million phones. But equally importantly, you will go beyond the English and maybe Hindi syndrome. You will have access to these phones in every language in India. So India's unique problem of 22 official languages and several hundred languages and dialects means it's impossible to have, before AI came along, it was impossible to have an interface in every language. You couldn't really build it. Today, you can actually, using language AI, you can make it accessible in every Indian language, in every dialect you have. Because in India, if you go 50 kilometers in the Hindi region, the language changes slightly. You'll have Maithili, Bhojpuri, this, that, whatnot. How do we, tap into that nuance that is there? And AI will also enable us to contextualize knowledge and information and make sure that you are able to get what you need at the right time. So we think combination of AI for language and spoken language, and where the computer speaks to you and speaks back, and contextualization, along with the fact that the networks will become more widespread and the phones will become cheaper, is actually the way that you will take the reach of what we have today to 1 billion people. So this is a big unlock where we use technology, DPIs, digital public infrastructure, plus AI to the 1 billion Indians. So this is clearly something that makes a lot of sense. Now for that, you need to build low-cost population scale AI. And this is something which In India, we have demonstrated in the DPI world, right? So we built Aadhaar for 1.3 billion people at a fraction of the cost that's done elsewhere, does 80 million authentications a day, 5 million KYCs a day. It's very cheap. UPI does 16, 17 billion transactions, free to use. It's the only country in the world where I can transfer 1 rupee to somebody without paying any transaction fee. So really, so we know what it means to build population scale, frugal, high volume, low cost infrastructure. And the same thing can now be applied to AI. So you'll see that AI will be used in this way, which is why one of the goals of open source models in AI, like what's being built at AI for Bharat, is to make sure that we have enough data in Indian languages which is spoken as a public good. So anybody, any one of you, every startup in this room can use the data which is there on Indian languages to put an Indian language interface to your products and services. So this is an example of how you create at scale, and this will be done in a way that you reduce reasoning and inference costs. So I think the same principles of high volume, low cost that India did in DPI will be applied to AI at population scale with open data sets. So that's a clear thing on technology that has to be done. So already UPI has an Indian language interface. You can speak to the phone and transfer money. So these kind of things will only become more in the coming years. Another example of how AI will benefit India is how do we empower farmers, because India has the large number of farmers, still a big part of the economy, and there's something which is being built called Open Agri Network. And it's getting actually rolled out in 2 states in the next few months. And the center also has a plan to roll it out under something called Vistar. And this will give all AI knowledge of agriculture at the fingertips of the farmer in a language of his or her choice. So these are all things that will apply AI at scale to making sure our Indian farmers get access to the best information, best markets, and so on. And similarly, AI is being applied as we speak in education, because how do we get millions of children to be able to read and write? And this is already happening in 6,000 schools across 38 districts in Tamil Nadu, and many other states are looking at it. So what is happening in effect is AI is being applied at scale to language, agriculture, education, and all very important things, and in a way that you have access to it. For example, language AI is open source, which everybody in this room can use. At the same time, it's also about how do we get our businesses. Remember, we talked about 63 million businesses, of whom only 8 million are in the GST net. How do those guys become top class? So the whole ecosystem of startups that have platforms for precision manufacturing, for identifying downtime, for predicting things. So what's going to happen is that there is a synergy now between the tech startup world and the classical MSME world, where a huge number of startups are actually solving the pain points of these guys. So that is going to be a big push that you see happening soon. And that's really what's happening on the technology side. Now, what's happening on capital? Capital is another huge input on this. One of the things about India now is that it has equity, or it has capital at the whole cycle from seed to IPO. It's important that we have the complete life cycle of capital. So we have ostensibly 7,900 angels. I think there are more of them. So good thing about these angels is they're also former entrepreneurs. So Kunal Shah will fund, Kunal Shah I don't think knows how many he has funded, I think 400 or something. Then there'll be Rajan Anandan will be funding, Kunal Bal and Rohit Bansal will be funding. So suddenly Neeraj Singh of Spinny is funding. So suddenly all these guys who have built companies are funding the next generation of companies, angels. So we have a massive angel ecosystem. We have the VC ecosystem like our host today, Arkam, which is a $45 billion assets under management. And family offices. So in India, a lot of families who have family businesses are actually maybe perhaps selling those businesses and becoming investors. They don't want to be in the operating business, they want to invest entrepreneurs. So that itself we think is about 30 billion. And then of course you have the PE guys, all the Warburg Pincus of the world and Chris Capital and so on. And the best part is after a long drought, and I'm sure all our LPs said, when are the exits coming? The exits now are coming. And we are seeing huge growth in 2023, $15 billion of public market exits. And the reason why these exits are only going to grow is for the next reason, which is that retail investor participation is going up dramatically. Now, it's possible that when markets go up and down, this may go through some cycles, but the fundamental secular trend is people are investing much more in markets. Today, from a few million investors, we have 100 million unique equity investors with 180 million demat accounts. Suddenly, everybody's investing. And they're doing it through this amazing thing of a systemic investment plan where you debit the account every month. Today, the SIP volume is $24 billion a year. And this money is coming into the capital markets. And that's providing the fuel to buy the IPOs, which are coming out from the startup stable. So you have a unique situation where you have capital for every leg from seed to IPO. And then when you do the IPO, you have capital coming into the public markets through SIP to buy these IPOs. So it's like a perfect cycle of thing happening. And just to give you a sense, equity is a very small part of household assets. It's only 4.8%. In the US, it's 18%. That means there's still a long way to go in terms of deepening the equity markets as more and more people come into the capital markets. And by 2035, India will be the most preferred IPO market globally. Already, it is the market with the largest number of IPOs, though the value is less compared to the US. US has less IPOs, more value. We have more IPOs, but per IPO, it's less. And in fact, what is happening is people are coming back. Ghar wapsi is happening. So companies that were incorporated in Singapore or the US are actually flipping here, paying a ton of taxes, so that they can list in India. So list in India, I remember 7-8 years back, we had to persuade companies to come back and list. Now they themselves are coming back, they're paying a tax premium and listing here. And you see this with Zepto, Razorpay, PhonePe, Pine Labs, and many others. So that only shows that the Indian capital market will be the most attractive place for IPOs in the next 10 years. So it's a perfect environment where you have all the capital to go from seed to IPO, and then you have a willing market to absorb it. One of the reasons for this, apart from the volume of money that is coming in, is that India does not have that big an index market. In the US today, a lot of the capital is in index funds, right? State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, and others. Half the market actually is passive investment. In India, the passive investments are much lower. So more of it will be in active investments and IPO transactions. So it's like a perfect situation for growth and for more IPOs. So all you guys who are building those companies can look at this and get ready for the wave of things that is going to happen. Just like it's happening in equity, a similar thing is happening in credit. So both legs of the capital cycle, equity and debt, are well placed. So critical credit availability is reaching critical mass. 4 billion venture debt, 600 billion in NBFCs, priority sector lending 250 billion, and apart from all that, the banks have about 1.6 trillion to lend. So essentially you have a unique situation where the equity side of capital and the debt side of capital are both well placed. Then you're saying, so what's to be done? So there are two important things to do, two unlocks here, which we think will make a big difference. The first is, we have this unique system called account aggregator, which allows an individual or a small business to use data of their transactions to get access to credit. This is a unique thing that we have. It's already being used, by the way. Already 10% of loans, personal loans in India today are AA enabled. But only some 2-3% of loans are AA enabled for businesses, so it's much more on the personal side. And cumulative data sharing is about 144 million. Imagine if you can scale this up. In other words, everything is in place. We just have to press the accelerator on the AA system. Now, there are a number of things to be done. We have to get business data online. We have to get GST data online properly. We have to get other non-government data, income tax returns. Everything should be online where I can get my data, give it to a lender and get a loan. I'm sure Madhu will be very thrilled to hear this. Right, Madhu? Where's Madhu? So anyway, so this is a big unlock. How do we double down and make AA at scale and thing? So Credit B, and Madhu is here, is a good example of using all this stuff. Credit B is barely 6 years old, and they're already doing loans, 50 million loans using a tech platform. They don't meet anyone. It's all digital. It's all on the phone. $9 billion in value. And these guys are getting into 18,000 pin codes. India has total over 19,300 pin codes, which means in a short period of time, they reach every part of the market. So that means we remember the old thing, how do we address spatial disparity? That will be addressed because the new actors will reach markets much faster. And their loan is in 10 minutes, typical average size is 30,000 rupees, and they use all the tech we have. They use Aadhaar e-sign 94%, account aggregator 91%, Aadhaar eKYC 92%. So fundamentally, using the infrastructure we have, using the phone, they're able to reach 18,000 pin codes. Imagine if we can accelerate AA even more. So this is one clear unlock which is waiting, and there's nothing to be done except actually doing it. The second thing is tokenization of land assets. I mentioned to you earlier that 50% of the assets owned by Indians is in the form of land, which is not tradable. You can't sell it, you can't take a loan against it. It's like an asset which is there, but you can't do anything with it. We believe that tokenization of land assets using a proper ledger and so on can unlock these things where you can tokenize every piece of land, and then that can be traded very easily. And this is actually taken from a paper which I've co-written called the Finternet, on how you can tokenize assets. Of course, Finternet is not just about land assets, it's about all kinds of assets, but in the Indian use case, land assets is the classic place to start. Now, land assets are a state subject. So this will depend on individual states implementing tokenization and improving the quality of their registration, their property taxes, their title system, and so on. The number of things have to happen on each state. But as states realize the power of this, more states will tokenize. That will allow more and more people who own land to offer the land. They can either sell the land or they can get a loan against the land. And then they can get into starting a business. So this is another big unlock, which is tokenization of land assets. So that's about capital. So what's happening on entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is very fascinating because we expect 1 million startups by 2035. I'm just saying it, guys. Why are you clapping? You ought to make it happen. So today, I mean, if you go back 10 years, 2016, we may have had a few thousand startups, of which about 1,000 were funded. Today, we have 150,000 startups. We expect that the startups will grow at a 20% compounded annual growth rate. In other words, when the economy is growing at 8%, startups will grow at 20%, reaching 1 billion startups by 2035. So what is happening here? First, a form of binary fission. Startups lead to more startups, right? So you see, Flipkart, if you look at Flipkart, out of Flipkart, we have had Grow, Lalit Keshre, Spinny, Neeraj Singh, Slice, Rajan Bajaj, PhonePe, Samir and Rahul. And then people left PhonePe and started startups. In other words, we're having generations of startups where you have some basic company which does well, and they spawn some startup, they do well, they spawn other startup. Every time we have an IPO, there's going to be 100 more startups. All the chaps will cash in on their stock and go and start a new company, I think. So same thing with Zomato and so on. So just if you look at and this is a generational change over 10, 15 years, where just from the startups with the children of startups, we have 100 unicorns. And all these guys have been trained on what it means to be a startup, so they bring that experience, the quality of entrepreneurs, many of you are like that, and there are already 2,000 funded startups that come out of startups. So you're going to see this massive compounding of startups. I told you about the angels. The guys who made money are happily writing checks for the guys who want to start companies. So the whole thing is a virtuous cycle of capital and entrepreneurship. So this is an extraordinary thing where you will have 1 million startups in India by 2035. And this is a phenomenon which we have never seen before. So we don't know what it means if 1 million companies are all roaming around trying to fix problems. Something got to give. Something's going to happen. And I think that's the exciting thing which is going to happen by 2035. And interestingly, more and more startups are happening outside the metros. And they're solving different issues. So we have, for example, according to the DPIIT data, half the startups are outside the 8 metros. I don't know exactly how it is, but for example, Apna Mart. Apna Mart is the D-Mart for India's smaller cities. It's basically got lots of, they have a small footprint store in they have them, so nobody in Raipur, for example, is more than 600 meters from a store. And they're well designed, they're well lit and so on. And these guys are now planning to have hundreds of stores all across tier 2 towns. So they're not even going to come to the big cities. They're going to Raipur and Bhilai and the smaller towns of India, because they think that's where their business model will work. Or look at Unorg, which is like a Zomato hyper-pure for street hawkers. So this guy buys materials and gives it to a hawker on the street who has a cart. So today a hawker on the street gets up at 3 in the morning, goes to the market, buys bread and eggs and all that stuff, and he spends 3-4 hours getting the material and starting his shop at 7 in the morning. What Anurag does is does that buying for you and delivers it to your cart at 7 in the morning. So you don't have to do anything. And then they will get water bottles, they will get ready to cook momos, stuff like that. So fundamentally, this guy is changing the productivity of a street hawker and reducing the time he spends on buying material, and he has more time to spend with customers and increase his revenue. And he's also going to train these guys to make new things. So the guy who makes batata vada will make omelette, the omelette guy will make momos, the momo guy will make something else, and he'll have more products to sell. So this is out of Lucknow. So the key thing here is how the unlock here is how do we accelerate these startups outside the big metros? Because we talked again about spatial, in disparity. One way is to get a lot more startup movement across the country, everywhere. All good? There's too much? Sorry. And then, of course, rethinking models, which an example is JAR. Nishchay is here. I didn't know about JAR till I was looking at the data on autopay. Autopay is, you can set up a standing instruction, every day you deduct X rupees and all that. I thought it'll be Netflix or something, autopay subscription. And then it turned out to be a company called JAR, which happened to be about 100 meters from where I am in Bangalore, in Koramangala. They're number 1 autopay user in India. It's amazing. And what do? Every day, or I think daily, right? It's daily. Daily they'll deduct 50 rupees from your account and put it into an account from which you can buy gold or something like that. Or you can do anything actually. Now what is this? This is a way for people to do small savings by giving some money from their money every day. So this is thing you could never have done. By the way, it was done 100 years back. There was a bank called Syndicate Bank. Syndicate Bank was set up in 1925, exactly 100 years back, by a guy called Tonse Madhav Anand Pai, TMA Pai. And TMA Pai in 1928 launched pygmy deposits. So he would hire people to go to everyone's house and they would give him 2 annas, which is about 10, 12 paisa, and they would collect money and create savings. So the pygmy deposit was invented in 1928. What JAR has done is create a modern digital version of a pygmy deposit where everything is on the phone, everything is an auto pay, every day you deduct some money and people can create savings. So this is how we take an idea but modernize it. And Tonse Madhav Anand Pai is the grandfather of Ranjan Pai, who, as you know, is an investor of renown in Bangalore. And then we see what's happening with a firm like Meesho. Meesho has a large national market for buyers and sellers. Most of the people on Meesho are selling for the first time on an online platform. Most of the buyers on Meesho are buying for the first time on an online platform. So people like Meesho are helping people who are not digital, who are outside the system. And we talked earlier about how do we get access to markets. So platforms like Meesho and ONDC kind of platforms will actually allow small guys to sell to a national market. So this is another important thing that has to be unlocked. And we think that if we do all this, we talked about 63 million MSMEs. We think that at least 10 million can become truly modern enterprises because they have access to technology. They can go to ClearTax and get their tax filing done. They can go to they can use UPI. They can use spot draft for the legal contracts. So basically, the technology is now available for small guys to modernize themselves. In some cases, they are forced to modernize because they have to pay taxes. They have to use GST, income tax, all that. So fundamentally, a combination of push and pull will bring 10 million of these companies into the formal sector in the next 10 years. And that's going to be the smarter guys, the guys who want to move forward. So I think we're going to see a lot of that happening. And then finally, I'll talk about formalization. We saw the data that India is among the lowest in formalization, right? We saw the... Now, we know that half of India's workforce will be AI native. We will have 380 million Gen Z people. Now what is this Gen Z? Gen Z are people born between 1997 and 2012. Think about it. So when Aadhaar was launched, the oldest Gen Z were 12 years old. When UPI was launched, the oldest Gen Z were 19 years old. And there are 380 million of them. These people have been born to this world because they haven't seen a world without a phone. So they will be the first to use all this AI and all that stuff. And there'll be a lot more women in participating in the workforce. I see that all the time. More and more people are talking about women working for them. So we're going to have young people, AI native, who are born with a mobile phone in their hand. So what does this mean for the India's transformation? So when you look at the last several years, we can think of it in this curve. First of all, the number of users will go to, say, 900 million. That is because prices of phones will fall, Indian language interface, I can speak in Hindi, all that stuff. Then we began with communication and entertainment. So we had, WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and YouTube and all that stuff. All basically global companies, big tech companies. Then we got into payments and transactions. I talked about Meesho, which has got 150 million active users. PhonePe has 350 million active users. It has 48% of the payment market. PhysicsWala Who would have heard of Physics Wala? Why did Physics Wala happen? Because Physics Wala brought three things together. First, in 2016, Jio dramatically reduced the cost of data. So anybody could do video on the phone. Second, YouTube. Third, UPI, because Alak Pandey could take a lesson and charge a few rupees for it using UPI. So the combination of a talented, super talented teacher like Alak Pandey with YouTube plus UPI plus phone created a multi-billion-dollar company. When you think about it, he's India's biggest creator, right? He created this out of all these things. So we saw that phenomenon. And then as we go towards what we're calling as work and earn, in other words, the next big thing is working and earning. Working, learning and earning. What are we seeing here? We're seeing companies like Urban Company, which, by the way, everybody thinks Urban Company is about, people coming and, doing a manicure in your house for you and all that. But actually the biggest user of Urban Company is air conditioning repairs. People who come and fix your air conditioner. So they're providing people to come and do services for you, and that's a very... Or Rapido, which is really changing the whole mobility market with bike taxis, and in places like Hyderabad, they're as big or bigger than the public transport. And of course, Zepto, which is some two 22-year-old guys, changing the whole quick commerce business. So these are all guys who are getting there. But all this is going to take us to a new era of reimagining how work will happen. Because as these AI-enabled, digital-first Gen Z guys come into the world, they're going to use a phone for getting work. They're going to use a phone at scale. And that's a whole new phenomenon which we're going to see very soon. And also digitization will address this spatial inequality. If you look at the credit B data, 80% of loans are outside the big metros. That means they already reached small towns. But Rapido, only 20% of rides are in non-metro. That means that the digital stuff moves faster than the physical stuff. But over time, it'll reach, you'll have a Rapido guy in Bhilai, Durgapur, Rourkela, whatever. So this will basically address more of it'll not address everything, but certainly address part of the spatial inequality. Let's take smart stuff. They are basically providing workers who are coming from, remember I showed you that chart of 200 million people moving from north to south, east to west. So they are enabling that supply chain. Now, you people have heard of the Silk Route, right? In India, we have three other routes. The rice route, the wheat route, and the non-veg route. Now, what the hell is that? So essentially, what a friend, my Arpit, told me. People who eat rice, who are mainly in Bihar, Bengal, and all that stuff, Jharkhand, Orissa, they want to come to the south where people eat rice. And people who eat wheat, like people in Purvanchal and etc., go west to Punjab and all that where they eat wheat. In other words, the trajectory of migration is what they eat. So the people who eat rice come to the south, and people who eat wheat go to the west. So we have two routes. And then the people who want to eat fish come to Tamil Nadu or Kerala, because they know they'll get better fish and meat there. So essentially, diet is the basis for migration. And these guys have 22,000 people. So these are all people, they're all getting formalized. They have a ESI account, they have a PF account, they do referrals, so they bring their friends from their village and so on. So the whole thing is new models of formalization are now happening, which can take us quite a bit ahead. So we think that work, the big thing that will happen in the next few years is work will get reimagined as digitization, whether it's formal jobs, gig workers, or micro entrepreneurs. All these will get reimagined by digitization. Zetwork, for example, is a startup that does $1.6 billion of revenue. They essentially aggregate factories, they have their own factory, and they're able to manufacture for different companies around the world. And this is a company set up very recently, which already has 1.6, 2017. Or Rapido, which has 9 million drivers and does 3.5 million rides per day. And all these drivers are gig workers who make 35 to 50,000 rupees. So it's clearly creating a huge category of jobs. And 91 trucks here. What is 91 trucks doing? Again, they are converting people who are truck drivers to entrepreneurs. So these guys work for others. They enable them to buy the truck. They will get second-hand trucks, recondition them, and then offer them to the drivers. They help them to get the loans, and that's how they're going to create a whole new set of micro-entrepreneurs, people who own these trucks. So everywhere you see these changes happening across the board. And then you said, okay, they said, what's the next UPI? What? The next UPI is energy. You're saying, what energy? Energy is the next UPI because today we buy, one thing is we know that we're going to get to the age of electricity. It's more and more stuff on electricity. Now we are used to buying energy in small amounts. Like people in the village would go into the forest to get some wood. That's energy small. People will buy some coal and use it every day. When you buy an LPG cylinder, you're buying packetized energy. You're buying a cylinder of LPG. But electricity, we have always thought of something coming from the grid. Or we buy a generator because we don't get electricity and burn some oil. But the future is going to be going to millions of small producers of energy. Every home will be an energy producer because they have rooftop solar. Every home will be an energy storer because they have an EV battery. So every home is a producer of energy, seller of energy, buyer of energy, and all that. And these trades may not be with the grid, they may be with your neighbor. So you're going to buy and sell energy like UPI. That means you're going to create millions of energy entrepreneurs who will all invest in producing small amount of energy and selling it to each other. So the whole energy is going to be a huge thing which will create its own set of entrepreneurs. But what do we need? We need to dramatically simplify our laws. In fact, my wife Rohini works in this space. She's written an article recently with Manish Sabharwal. How do we make our laws simpler? How do we reduce, what are the actions which lead to a criminal, because there are all kinds of things you do, it's a criminal act under the laws. How do you make laws simpler in language? The Income Tax Act, the new Income Tax Act is a good example of how you can rewrite a law and make it simpler in language. How do you reduce compliances? Labor inspector, factory inspector, all kinds of stuff. These are all laws either inherited from the British era, colonial laws, or they're the laws of an era when we had a socialistic mindset. We didn't trust entrepreneurs. But in a world where there are going to be 1 million entrepreneurs, this doesn't work anymore. So the dramatic requirement of fixing the regulation, fixing the compliances and laws is super important. So this is an unlock. This is a huge unlock. And how do we do population scale formalization? Every individual should have all their benefits totally portable. So when I change jobs, I can take my insurance with me, I can take my provident fund with me, I can take my pension with me, I can take my life insurance with me. So everybody's mobility of benefits is very important. This is rethinking how benefits are done. It's not going to one EPFO and getting it. It's really about thinking it very differently. And how do you make portability of your credentials? We already have some of that in our DigiLocker where you can store your degree certificates. But imagine, you're a guy. I hope you guys are not getting bored. I'm a little worried that there's no action from you. Suppose you're a guy who's working in a Korean restaurant in Hyundai, in Sri City where there's a Hyundai factory, because they need Korean food. And you learn how to make kimchi. I'm just thinking about it. So now, if you can get someone to certify that you make good kimchi and have a little video which he certifies that this guy makes good kimchi, and then tomorrow there's a Korean restaurant opening in Indiranagar, and you can apply to that job with this video and you'll get a stupendous increase in income. So how do we make credentials portable? So if we can create a nationally portable credential system and a nationally portable benefit system, everything opens up. And that is required for population scale formalization. You want to go formalization from 15% to 180%, you have to do it differently. Business as usual is not going to work here. So I come now therefore to the end of what I have to say. So I have 8 specific recommendations. One is AI for 1 billion Indians by focusing on Indian language, last mile consumers and MSMEs, emphasizing agriculture, health and education. Now, clearly there are many other use of AI, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you want to change the trajectory of growth, this is what you have to do. To accelerate capital, a lot of good stuff happening. 2 unlocks, maximize AI penetration, go all in on AI, and I think that's something we can do. And land monetization with tokenization using internet architecture. So this will unlock even more capital and give you a further momentum on the capital side. How do we unshackle entrepreneurs? Very specifically look at funding outside the metros. Because if you really want to reduce spatial inequality, we want entrepreneurs in small towns, villages, rural, etc. So clearly that has to be done very proactively. And of course, make sure that those 10 million MSMEs which are trying to be modern have access to technology, market, credit, and so on. And then turbocharge formalization. This is actually the most transformational in many ways. If we can create a truly national market for credentials, which are trustable, which I can go anywhere, show it and get a job, if I can create a truly natural market for benefits, so I can go anywhere and take my benefits along with me, and if we can deregulate and simplify laws, compliances, decriminalization, etc., language, this will open up, because the rest of it will happen. The 1,000 entrepreneurs will come. They'll raise the money, they'll go public, they'll make money for everybody. But finally, if you reduce the friction to them, they will go somewhere else. So I believe if you do all these things, and the very 8 specific recommendations, 6% to 8% growth should happen. Thank you.